How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Before I Forget. This is my video channel inspired by my Instagram channel, 1985 Road Dog. I have a book out called Tales from the Gutter and Other Rock and Roll Shenanigans, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the online retailers. Check it out. Hey, today I'm going to talk about, the pre-internet days, which, it's really the last time that you had to really search for things. Radio, for an example, that was the lifeblood. Television, if you were in rural America in the 70s, there were like 3-4 TV channels. That's it. And everything signed off at 2 o'clock in the morning. That was the end of it. You went to sleep. So it was very, difficult to have access to the music and the art that was out there. I mean, today with the internet and social media, it's everywhere. You can't get away from it. So, you take it for granted. A lot of younger people take it for granted how easy the access is to information today. I'm an older person now. I'm not a 20-year-old kid, but I don't want to sound like my grandfather. But you wanted info, and you were in school. You had to go to the library and pull out dictionaries. Encyclopedias, and research with books. If you wanted to find out about music, you listened to the radio. And if you were in a rural area, small little area in the middle of, Georgia or Oklahoma or Kansas or wherever you were, those people it was just the radio. And if you didn't have access to big city radio, you really didn't hear anything cutting edge or different or new. If you grew up in New York City, it's an amazing radio station. So and even college radio stations then that you could access for new music. If you were in the middle of Georgia, in the middle of the woods, you had a local station that played top 40, and that was it. I did live in Georgia in the 70's. The local station just played the hits, which was great because it was a variety of hits. It was rock, soul, pop, country. It was all mushed together on hit radio, which exposed you to lots of different things that you might not have discovered otherwise. But, I could get, where I lived in Georgia, I could get very faintly 96 Rock, which was an FM station that played, whole album sides or played bands you'd never hear before. Remember, music wasn't free. If you wanted to find out what a new band sounded like, you had to go buy their album or hear it on the radio. And, I could get 96 Rock really faint, and you could hear albums, whole album sides. I remember hearing the album, there's the Steve Marriott, who was the singer and founder of Humble Pie, went solo. He put out a solo album in 76 called Marriott, 1976. I heard that whole album on 96 Rock one night, really faintly. And I went out the next day, or whenever I could get into town and had enough money, and I bought that album. But that's how you were exposed. Believe it or not, AM radio, the signal for AM radio, powerful stations out of New York City, big cities, could reach to Georgia at nighttime. I don't know the exact scientific thing, but what the theory is, or what the story is here. But I know at night a lot of frequencies shut down, and then it would clear the airwaves, so I could position my little AM radio just right. I could get WABC in New York City AM radio from my little town I was living in Georgia. That was just like you were tapping into civilization. WABC AM had such a strong signal. I believe it broadcast from the top of the Empire State Building, and it was AM, not as sonically not as clean and not in stereo like FM. FM was still a new thing in the 70s, but AM radio was where it was at. And you could get WABC. I remember one time in Georgia getting WLS in Chicago at night, really faintly. But that's what you did. If you were into music, I mean, I was, a music freak. I was just absorbed and obsessed with music. So I would have this little AM radio. You'd sleep with it at night. And when it was quiet and it was nighttime, you could turn that dial just a tiny hair and you'd get in these stations. That's how you discovered about stuff. And then later on, you watched Don Kirshner's rock concert or Midnight Special on TV. And even in the 80s, one time I was on tour with LA Guns, working for LA Guns as their road manager. And we ended up in some small little mountain hamlet in Kentucky. I think the main highway was closed, right? And we had to take side roads and small little roads through because the highway was shut down for some reason. And we ended up stopping at this little cafe, a little diner in Kentucky. And it was LA Guns. I mean, you know what those guys look like. Long black hair, leather, whatever. They look like a rock band. And this woman and her two daughters came over to us. Now, this is 1988. No internet, no social media. Cable TV is still not far from being in every home. So most people had a few TV channels in their local radio, especially if you lived in a, small little area of Kentucky somewhere. Like you're like completely isolated from everything and these people in this at this time. So anyway, we're in this diner, and it's 1988, and this woman comes over with her two daughters, like, I don't know, teenagers, junior high school age maybe, around that age. And she came over to LA Guns and started talking to us and asked them if they were the Rolling Stones. And she was serious. It wasn't like a joke. And we all knew she was serious. So we kind of looked at each other like, this is weird, man. Because it's like, it's like a David Lynch movie or something. She thought that the band was the Rolling Stones. And then she started telling us that she was the president of the Dave Clark 5 fan club. The Dave Clark 5, who, mid-60s. So we were like shocked. But she was totally serious. And her daughters had no clue either. They thought this was the Rolling Stones. Again, no social media, no internet, no computers. 3, 4 TV stations at the most. Your local newspaper where you would get the news, or the 5 o'clock news at night. It was very, very isolated America, even in the 80s. And this woman thought LA Guns was the Rolling Stones. We were all freaked out. Like, we looked at each other like, this is bizarre. And they looked kind of weird, very, Deliverance kind of vibe. It was weird, man. And we would have never been in this area of Kentucky if we didn't have to get off the highway. That's the point of the story. But again, people take it for granted today how easy everything is. Access, looking up anything, whatever, it's instant on your phone. You had to really dig back then, and you had, especially with music, radio was everything. The strong signal of the radio stations. If you had a strong signal, if you could get big city radio, you were exposed to things. You could listen to, WNEW or WPIX in New York in the late 70s and hear on late night radio stations, punk rock bands and stuff. 2 a.m. type of stuff, which then eventually graduated to, heavy metal shows at 2 a.m. and stuff like that. But in the beginning of FM radio, it was pretty free form. Then, like anything, it got a little bit more structured, especially during, business hours, daytime hours. But at night, it was free form, a lot of it, and you could hear entire album sides. if you were lucky enough to be able to pick up those big city radio stations, because there were only a handful of them, really. You know, couple dozen stations, few dozen stations in the whole country playing newer stuff, and the rest was AM, or even if it was FM, they played the top 40. But you know, I just it amazes me how easy everything is today, how you can just find out stuff, you know. And it wasn't that way, man. And that LA gun story, kind of, I thought about that the other day. I don't know why, which led me to thinking about the access to information. It was everything. And you had to really, really be hungry, whether it was magazines or concerts or going to see a band, and they didn't even advertise who the opening act was. And then you get there and the opening act is like, you know, Cheap Trick or somebody. You've never seen him or never heard him before. You had to be dedicated and driven. Today, it's so easy. That's why I hear from a lot of people through my social media and everything about, you know, why is it can't be that way anymore? It's because there's no hunger. There's no drive. Everything's so easy. Everything's handed to people, really. Anybody can make a record now at home. Anybody can stream it to the world. Anybody can make art and put it out on the internet and social media. It's the focus to get people to hear your band or watch your film or look at your photography. It was person to person, man. It wasn't like, here, me blast it out to the world. So the hunger, you know, any band that wants to make it today, get off social media and just play, man. It's you have to be hungry, and you have to have focus, and you have to be driven. And a lot of bands and a lot of musicians or artists today are not really hungry, and it's just too easy. Anybody can dress up like Motley Crue and put a video out there and they'll look at me, I'm like the 80s. That's not what it's about, man. It's not about copying that. It's about doing your own thing. Yeah, it's fun and it's nostalgia. I mean, in the 1970s, there was a huge, you know, big 50s revival in the 70s that started with the movie American Graffiti, 1973. And then Happy Days, the TV show, and Grease. As the 50s were a big revival of the 50s, but most of it was dress up. Nobody was trying to make records and sound like a 50s band. It was mostly dress up and fun, you know, but it wasn't like directing art. It was just it's just like a flashback to the 50s. It was a fun time. So you can't just dress up like the 80s and just, you know, you've got to make your own thing. Be influenced, you know, do what you want to do, of course, but like, you've got to be hungry to just change the world or change art or change the perception of what a rock band is or whatever it is. You've got to just dig deep. But, you know, I'm saying this as somebody that's been through it all. So, you know, if I was 20 years old today, I'd be doing exactly what everyone else is doing probably. So this is just words of, I wouldn't say words of wisdom, but my experiences in life, why things are not what they were in the 80s or the 70s, even the 90s. It's all because of social media and the internet and the access to the world at your fingertips. Get hungry, man. I kind of went all over the place with this one, but I just felt like telling that story about LA Guns, and I appreciate you listening. Don't forget, 1985 Road Dog is my Instagram. My book is Tales from the Gutter and Other Rock and Roll Shenanigans. And I will speak to you soon. Ciao.